Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We are presented by Gatorade on this Tuesday. Great to have you with us. Dave Revson alongside Jake Butt, back from Seattle after a really important game and an impressive performance by the Huskies.
Super impressive. And how about Damon Williams, man? I mean, my goodness, talk about a response coming off of probably his worst game on the road against Michigan. The offense looked great. Jed Fish looked great. And I just got to say this, Dave, this is my favorite time of year. And not because I get to eat all the bags of candy that my wife buys to give out to kids for trick or treat, but because it's championship football season. As the weather changes, the leaves change, you could feel the intensity and the importance of both Washington and Illinois. Obviously, Washington gets the win, and we'll talk about it, in the driver's seat to potentially make a playoff push, as are a number of teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, we will break down all of those schedules. It is November this weekend. And November football, obviously huge. Yogi Roth with us as well, and we are really setting up the drama, Yogi.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than this. It's the stretch run, as every coach likes to say. Jake, I love that you're into Halloween, right? Get a little trick-or-treating in, get a pumpkin spice latte, turn on and watch the tape. That's where we sit right now with November football. And you're right. I think there's a part of this conference that's still undefined, right? We know Indiana and Ohio State. We think we know the Ducks. And then it's a fun conversation. And watching your game back that you had in Seattle, I'm thinking, who's a better duo at quarterback and running back in America? I mean, legitimately, and Jonah Coleman. Then you look at the performance from Denzel Boston. Washington is peaking right now if they can continue to get healthy. A fun storyline to follow, as are all of these. And just calling our game, man, it felt like we were playing for a CFP berth. There were two teams that didn't have a conference win in Rutgers and Purdue. So the competitive temperament in this league at this time of the year has just been at a premium.
No doubt, because you have some teams battling for bowl positioning or just to get a bowl bid. That was a huge game for Rutgers to try to do it. But then the intrigue, I think the most intrigue is obviously at the top, and the Big Ten has so much power there. That is our big story. The Big Ten once again with the top two teams in the AP poll this week. Ohio State's number one, Indiana's number two. Think about this. There have been 10 AP polls this season. In 6 of them, the Big Ten has had the top two teams. It's had the number one team in all but the preseason poll. Of course, both of those teams undefeated, as you see. 7-0 Ohio State, 8-0 Indiana. You've got Oregon squarely in the playoff picture as well. The Ducks are number 6 this week. Their lone loss coming to the Hoosiers. Let's start with Ohio State. They are the number one team. The pollsters have them as the clear number one. Yogi, you agree with that assessment? You see Ohio State head and shoulders?
No, I don't see that. I don't see head and shoulders. I think they've been as steady of any team in the country. I think that this weekend they're going to play the most talent they've faced on the other side of the line of scrimmage since week 1 in the game against Texas. The thing that is so impressive, the thing I believe to be true, is that with a young and inexperienced team, if we want to comp it to the team that went and won a national championship a year ago, it doesn't feel heavy this year. And you guys know the standard at Ohio State. Anybody who just follows college football knows that every year it's to win a Big Ten title, beat Michigan, and find your way into the mix in the conversation to go win a national title. Last year was ridiculous. Like, that was just that times 10, if you'd like to give a little math equation here on a Tuesday. When I look at them this year, I just go to Ryan Day. And I say, we have not seen many teams across the country. You can go to the top 5. You can go to the top 10. How many teams have been steady all year long, right? We saw Miami slip up against Louisville. You saw Oregon in their game against Indiana. You look at even Indiana when they went on the road to Iowa, it wasn't perfect the entirety of the game. They got that win. But for Ohio State to be young, to be inexperienced, to be in Columbus with the standard there, to me, watching what Ryan Day has done, it's just masterful. And I don't know if he's going to be on the list for Coach of the Year candidates, but he is on mine because of the way that he's navigated this team's growth. And how, to me, watching the tape every week, it doesn't feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders. I think that's going to bode really well as they host Penn State this weekend.
Yeah, Yogi, his leadership's been outstanding. I think one subtle thing to consider here, especially as we talk about making a playoff push, is the way he controls the entire picture, all 3 phases. And I know some Buckeye fans might be frustrated about the offense. Maybe they want him to put up even more points. We're nitpicking, of course. But when you do the math, they're a team that has a very slow pace of play. When you do the math in terms of snaps per game and extend it out over the course of a season, they will have effectively played 1 fewer game than their opponents in terms of total snap counts. So he's building in an additional bye week into the season just by controlling the clock and playing ball control throughout the game. And what's really scary is that team is so talented, and yet because of the coaching decisions, they should be fresh going into the postseason. What Ohio State has that I haven't done a deep dive on anyone, but I don't believe anyone else in college football has. I believe they have 4 top 15 or 20 picks on their roster. Caleb Downs is a top 15, 20 pick. Arvell Reese will be a top 15, 20 pick. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith, he's not draft eligible, will be a top 5 pick. And then I think Carnell Tate, especially with the success of Emeka Egbuka, will be a top 20 pick in next year's NFL draft. So you have this high-level talent that will be fresh late into the season because of Day's leadership and decision-making.
The high-level talent is on a revolving door there in
Somehow.
Columbus, right? A bunch of guys leave. You had 14 leave for the NFL draft after last year, and yet you look at them and you say they may have the best talent level in all of college football. So we look at their schedule ahead. This was supposed to be this weekend one of the games of the weekend. It has not, or of the season, I should say, has not worked out that way, obviously due to Penn State struggles. In fact, the way it's played out, the next 4 games, honestly, guys, pretty cushy. Those 4 teams have won 4 total conference games, and 3 of those wins are UCLA. And then you have the season finale at Michigan, a matchup that hasn't gone all that well for Ohio State in recent years, as we know. When you look at that schedule, if you have an eye on getting to the number 1 seed, and of course, if they were to run the table in those games, they'd have to play almost certainly Indiana, and we can talk about Indiana here in a moment. We will talk about them. But what do you think about the Buckeyes, the defending champs, and their chances to be number 1 in the CFP seedings?
Well, they got a great chance, as good a chance as anybody, and they control their own destiny in that sense. But I think what's really interesting is as dominant as they've been and as good as they have looked, that game against Michigan is really interesting because Michigan's a good football team and it's a rivalry and that has those added dynamics. If Michigan somehow wins that game, all of a sudden both those 2 teams would have one loss. They'd have one conference lost, which means you'd have to get into some serious tiebreakers. Michigan could then go to Indianapolis, and that could really mess up the season for the Buckeyes. So as good as they've been, there has to be an urgency, as I'm sure and confident there will be for Coach Day down the stretch of the season there, Yogi.
Yeah, this is a fun conversation because you played in that rivalry, and I just come from a school of thought in my football life is that every game is, within a vacuum, its own game. And the Michigan game and the rivalry and the fans and the expectation playing in it, like the intensity gets ratcheted up. The challenge, and I think the task at hand for Ohio State all season and over the last month of this season, is to treat every game as though it is a championship environment. That is what the best teams have done in the history of all sport. I don't care what sport you want to look at. And I just believe that. And I know that's hard to navigate. It's hard to do as a player. It's hard to do as a coach. It's impossible to do as a fan. But for them to maximize their potential as a program this year, that to me would be the challenge. And I think we've seen that, to your point of their growth. It isn't as though, at least watching it, they're saying, oh, well, this defense does this. Let's see if we can put up 40 on it. Let's see if we can open it up in this regard. They have a great strategy of just bringing everybody along. And I think it's going to bode well. That's why I think by the end of the year, I still believe that this team is not playing with that weight on their shoulder. And I think when they go into that game, it's just going to be what it's always, a heck of a ball game, a physical ball game at the line of scrimmage. And we'll see how it shakes out. And it's going to be a challenge for them. But I hope they're not making it more than it is, because I think we've seen that recipe not necessarily work. Whether it's win or loss, you never play your best when you go down that road. So I'd be so curious to know the dynamics of the locker room around their opponent. Like, is it really nameless, faceless, or is it, oh, here comes a different logo, we've got to elevate? If so, that's how you find inconsistent performance, and that's where I think teams can slip up a little bit.
That's the part that's really interesting to me, because I agree with your assessment. I mean, I do think they've looked really comfortable in their own skin so far this year. The challenge does become that game against Michigan. We know how much weight is put on that one. Are they able to have that approach that you guys are talking about? I do think it's fair to point out, even were they to lose to Michigan, again, they didn't make the Big Ten championship game last year and they won the national championship. They haven't made it 4 times in a row. Yeah. They won the national championship last year. So it's a different era in college football for sure. But again, we understand the premium that is put on that game in Columbus and, for that matter, in Ann Arbor. Okay, let's get to Indiana. I asked Yogi if he thought Ohio State was the clear-cut number 1. He said he did not think so. I think there's an argument that could be made for Indiana. In fact, you had 11 voters vote for them as number one this week. How do you assess what has been a juggernaut in the Hoosiers?
They absolutely are a juggernaut. And I think the number one thing that stands out to me about Indiana is this is a program built with a rock-solid foundation, and that's credit to their head coach, Curt Cignetti. This is one of the best coached football teams in all three phases, including special teams, which the later you get into the season, when the margins get thinner, special teams become a major, major factor. I look at both their coordinators with Haynes on the defensive side of the ball. That is an attacking defense that suffocates you. They win the mental battle pre-snap and post-snap. Obviously, offensively with Mendoza, maybe the number one overall pick in next year's NFL draft. That's where this program is at. They have NFL players on both sides of the football, and they're playing with a certain level of confidence, too, that they know what they're capable of this season. I mean, how many people picked UCLA to upset them and somehow pull that win last week? And yet Cignetti, as a leader, knows all the right buttons to push. I've yet to see a game where the Hoosiers show up unprepared mentally for whatever the challenge is at stakes on a given weekend, Yog.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. And I think that they are the number two team. I just don't think it's as wide as people think when you watch them play. I mean, if they had a different logo on or a different history behind them football-wise, I think we'd have a different conversation. So let's have that conversation. Why are they different? To me, I'm going to echo you with Bryant Haynes and this defensive coordinator. Go back and just watch this defensive line every single snap. They make things so challenging for the offensive front, for the opposing quarterback and backs. Because on any given snap, a defensive end is looping inside to become a defensive tackle. A defensive tackle starts inside over the center, and then all of a sudden they're dropping into coverage. They make you think, they make you communicate, and before you know it, because they are talented, to your point, they're explosive coming off the edge, they find themselves in the backfield. They're bringing a linebacker from depth. They're bringing a safety from a cornerback position. I mean, they're bringing so many different things that I believe force quarterbacks to slow down, hesitate, or speed up their process, which isn't good for the route combination and the integrity of the offense. So I just think it is big time. For all the love we give Matt Patricia, which we should, you need to also give it to Bryant Haynes nationally for what he has done. I love that Curt Cignetti did that earlier this week because he should, because they're playing like a team that can go win a national championship.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at it exactly that same way, and I think Haynes so significant that they were able to hold on to him. And Cignetti talked about that when we were on our camp visit with us this year, just talking about that may have been his greatest acquisition. We were talking about the portal. He said, hey, it's a lot of what you maintain as well. They maintained a lot of the players from last year, but he felt so good about having the continuity with both of those coordinators. It's incredible how good that defense is. And I think when you have the Heisman front runner on your team, people overlook the defense. I mean, they played 8 games. They've allowed their opponent into the red zone 11 times.
They're outstanding.
It's just crazy.
It's all three phases. I mean, special teams too, Dave.
No, they're absolutely phenomenal at everything they do. Let's check out their schedule. Let's just say the meat of it is behind them. Their 4 remaining opponents are 1-17 in conference play. The one win coming from the team they visit this week in Maryland, though obviously going to State College is never easy. But again, the complexion of that game has changed. Remember, they could likely lose a game and still get to Indy. They'd win a tiebreaker with Oregon. A 3-way tie could potentially trip them up. I mean, it just depends what teams are involved and what happens there going forward. But they are sitting pretty. They're in great shape, Yogi.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm just smirking, flashing back to the first interview you did with Coach Cignetti in Indy, and he was like, we're going to come on back here. And everybody was like, yeah, maybe. Like, I don't know, you can be an analyst on the set if you want to. And now they're likely going to come back. And I think when you look at their schedule, I think there's a story every week to pitch to your team of like, hey, this team can come get us. We're going to get the best version of this team. They're desperate. They're hungry for a win. And I love that because that to me is what can keep a very hungry team, and you know Curt Cignetti, and the memes are all over the internet. You can't be satisfied around him, and I think that's going to be what this team's approach is. I think they're mission-minded. I think we're going to find him in Indy, and I think they're going to take a real run at this whole thing. And then to your point on Fernando, the dude's making throws that not many quarterbacks would attempt. He's completing balls that many quarterbacks won't attempt, and I think that cannot be unnoticed. Send him to New York as of today. We'll see how the season plays out, but he's playing at an uncommon level.
Look, they're on a collision course with the Big Ten's best in Indy. Right now, that's projected to be Ohio State. And I can't help but think his very first pep rally. Can we pull up that video? The infamous video is going viral on social media. Let's hear what Cignetti had to say.
I've never taken a back seat to anybody and don't plan on starting now. Purdue sucks. But so does Michigan and Ohio State. Go IU.
So from his lips to our ears, right? He planted the seed of prophecy back then, and we talked about the schedule. They're on the collision course. And then what does he say? He says, hey, I win, Google me. And we're all laughing a little bit like, hey, coach, you do win. And we like the confidence, but this is Indiana. I mean, this is different. You can't get it done in Indiana. It's impossible. And then year one, he bulldozes all expectations. Year two, Dave, we're saying, can he really do it again? And the answer is no, he can't do it again. He could do it even better than what he did last year, and now the prophecy might be fulfilled. He's going to get everything he asked for, potentially, if they handle their business, a chance to win a Big Ten championship. How insane is that?
It's crazy, and I flash back, Yogi was alluding to it earlier, I flash back to the day of the Big Ten championship game right after he was hired. They brought him up from Bloomington. He sat down on the desk with Howard and Jerry and me, and he told us he wanted to see the stadium because they were going to be back there next year. And again,
Never in a million years could you have expected him to say that.
I just felt like, look, I'm sure this guy's a great coach and his track record is fabulous, but it's hard. The Indiana job is hard. And we had this conversation last week about kind of what we had seen historically from Indiana. And shame on me. Shame on me for being stuck in that mindset that this is what Indiana always had to be because this is what it had been. And I have so much respect for Jerry, right? He's sitting next to me, who I think is a great coach, and he will tell you about his struggles there. And it had a lot to do with outside factors, including having like 30 fewer scholarship players than he was allotted. But still, it's just a hard place to win. And for him to do it, he's a year behind schedule if he makes it there this year, because he said he would be there next year. But that's about the only thing that hasn't come true for him. Okay, let's get to Oregon. Yogi, they were not great in the rain against Wisconsin. Does that concern you at all?
No, look, I think championship seasons, they ebb and flow. And, kind of what I talked about Ohio State, they've been so steady. Oregon with a young team at a bunch of positions, and then you add in the factor of it was just gnarly weather. You watch the film, and the sun's coming out on the kickoff, and a few minutes later, there's no sun to be seen. I just think you have to win a bunch of different ways. And I think that's part of a season. And I go to the ethos, the core of that team. You watch Brock Thomas go out there as a walk-on quarterback from nearby Sheldon High School. Shout out Justin Herbert, same high school. And not only does he throw a touchdown, but he plays with command. He plays with confidence. Then you watch him post-game, and he's like, this is just kind of what I do, what we do. He gets carried off in the locker room and celebrated by his teammates, according to Dan Lanning in his post-game interview. And I just say all that of here you are at a major school. I mean, one of the biggest brands in all of college football. And I speak to the era we're in now. To have a walk-on be your backup quarterback and win the job and always kind of be defended by the head coach. Like, hey, everybody, he won the job. He's a pretty good player. To me, it just speaks to the culture. It speaks to what works every single Tuesday and Wednesday, which is your job isn't guaranteed. You got to come out to work. And those are the best teams, the ones that get better as the season goes on. So did they put up 750 yards? No, but they weren't going to go do that in driving rain. They were going to do that against a Wisconsin team that every week I come on this show on Tuesday and say, they are playing so hard for Luke Fickell. They did it again. The weather obviously was an issue for them, and they're not as talented as Oregon, but the point is nobody's laying down. The Ducks are getting everybody's best. I think they sit in a really good spot right now where they are. They got tested. They've been tested. The one time they lost in that test to Indiana. I think it's great for where this program sits. So they're not one of the top two, but they're squarely in the mix for a potential bye in the CFP. I mean, think about that with the way this league has shook out thus far.
And to get that bye, they would need to make a really impressive run here, Yogi, because this schedule is far and away the toughest of the three teams we're looking at. They have the bye week this week. Then they go to Iowa. Ask Indiana about how tough it is to play there. They have Minnesota and USC at home. And then they finish at Washington. And we'll talk about the Huskies in a bit. But, Jake, you were saying, it's not out of the question they could be playing for a spot in the CFP in that one. So what do you think about when you look at Oregon's schedule?
Well, it's the anti-Indiana. That is a tough schedule. I know this from personal experience. We were an undefeated playoff team in 2016 at Michigan. We went on the road to Kinnick, a game we should not have lost, and they ripped our heart out. And I know Michigan isn't the only team that has experienced the challenges of winning on the road at Kinnick. And then it's a short week to Minnesota. USC has firepower. And Washington, I don't think anyone wants to play a healthy Washington with the way DeMond Williams is playing. But here's the thing thing that I like about Oregon, and Yogi talked about this. This is a young football team. They're relying on a ton of freshmen: DeCorian Moore, De'Air Hill, Jordan Davison in the backfield, Brandon Finney, their stud corner, Aaron Flowers, their stud freshman. Those are all freshmen that they're relying on. That's an exponential curve when you're young. Each week you make big strides. So what the benefit for Oregon here is, I'd expect that these freshmen, which are the core of their team, play their best football down the stretch. And because of the challenge, they'll get to find out what they're actually made of, which is a good thing and fun for us.
It is indeed. I am really looking forward to that game in Iowa City, not just from Oregon's point of view, but from Iowa's point of view as well. And we're going to talk about the Hawkeyes as we continue here on the show, as we're going to look at the net back on Big Ten today. We talked about the three teams at the top of the league, their roads to the postseason. Here's where it gets really interesting. You have 5 Big Ten teams sitting on 2 losses. Last year, the Big Ten had 4 teams that finished with 0, 1, or 2 losses overall. All 4 of them made the CFP. So who can finish up with 2 losses this year? Let's start with Michigan. It is a schedule that lays out nicely. The next 3, not too bad at all. Northwestern Wrigley Field might be a challenge. You go to Maryland as well. But a great shot to be 9-2 heading into that game we were talking about just a little while ago against Ohio State at home. And again, it bears repeating, they have won 4 straight against the Buckeyes. If we mentioned they won 4 straight against the Buckeyes, I feel like we have. Yogi, this is very favorable.
Yeah, well, look, there's a couple realities, right? Win and you're in, no problem, right? Just based on what we talked about earlier, you beat Ohio State and you're dancing in the CFP. I think for them and for everybody in Ann Arbor, and I know, Jake, you got that game this weekend, I think you're rooting for USC and Washington the rest of the way. I think that's kind of where we are now with some of these teams as we're having this conversation. UW, to your point, Jake, you were there a week ago against Illinois. I mean, it's an impressive team, and it seems like they're just getting healthier and only getting stronger. Trojans go to Nebraska this weekend. If all of a sudden you can start to piece together those arguments and, you know, have a heck of a finish here, and let's just say you don't win that final game, I think you're in a really cool place, which is what we've talked about all offseason. What 3-loss teams getting in? So I think it's a fun conversation based on how their schedule has played out, how they've played. I'm also curious to watch the continual growth. I mean, they are winning at the line of scrimmage. It is so impressive. And then if they get down, that's what I want to see. If somebody jumps on Michigan early, how Bryce Underwood in this passing attack can respond. We haven't really seen that opportunity. He's made elite throws all year long, but I wonder what that might be like, because I do think freshmen grow in ways that maybe we don't always see, right? The leap from Oklahoma to last weekend to the end of the season is just going to be so massive. And I kind of want to see that opportunity for them. So maybe somebody can jump on him, Jake. Maybe you call it this weekend and we watch him just lead an amazing comeback with his arm.
Yeah, you know, it's a great exercise, though, to look at this schedule, because I think the most important thing that benefits Michigan is you're playing Ohio State at home. And the reason is why I see a clear difference in game planning around your young quarterback, whether it's home on the road. The Oklahoma game plan was hyper conservative. Obviously, USC jumped on them early. I felt that game plan was conservative. Michigan State also looked conservative. Well, at home, you have the benefit of a home crowd. You can hear your communication. Bryce Underwood is comfortable. He knows the facilities. So I think that benefits Michigan. And as is true for a lot of these teams, health is going to play a big factor. Cole Sullivan, your linebacker that was playing outstanding, he left the game with an injury. Justice Haynes has been injured and maybe isn't quite 100%. We know how important he is to what they do. They've had to shuffle along the offensive line, a unit that is playing much better. How healthy are they? Rod Moore is injured. So this team, when they play at their best, the team that played Washington, capable of beating anybody. But at times we've seen the youth, and if Michigan wants to get to the playoff and make a run at the Big Ten title game, they cannot afford to be less than what they're capable of in any of these final weeks.
Oh, I know he's been banged up, but if Justice Haynes isn't 100%, I don't think Michigan State would like to see 100% Justice Haynes.
Good point, yes.
He was awfully good this past weekend coming off the injury. I remember you could see the Wolverines on these very airwaves as we talked about on Saturday. Jake will be calling the game. A football doubleheader kicks off with Michigan State, Minnesota. Then it is Michigan welcoming Purdue to the Big House in prime time. Coverage begins with countdown to kickoff, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. As for a team that beat Michigan, USC, it's pretty challenging at Nebraska this week. Then a quick turnaround for a Friday night game at home against Northwestern. That is followed by a home game against Iowa and a trip to Oregon before they finish at home against UCLA. I mean, Jake, you win all those, and 100% with 2 losses, you are a playoff team. I don't think there's any doubt. That's a tough schedule.
Absolutely, but we're going to find out everything we need to know about the Trojans this weekend, because we know it's the road record. It's traveling across time zones,
Right.
and at some point, Lincoln Riley has to lead his team to taking that next stride. And it really is that different. You know, when you're at home, you get to sleep in your bed, if not a familiar hotel. You get your facilities to do a walkthrough. You have your film rooms. You can go to your cold tub, hot tub. When you go on the road, you're sleeping in a foreign hotel. You're doing walkthroughs in the parking lot. There is no cold tub and hot tub to get ready for the game. So you're completely out of whack and out of your schedule. I don't know if that's the reason why, but there is a distinction and a difference between the Trojans that have played on the road versus at home. If they can go on the road, Nebraska, that is an important game for both these teams. It is going to be a desperate football game for both these teams. We're going to find out everything we need to know about the Trojans, and I will wait to shape my perspective, Yogi, on what I expect them to do down the stretch of the season until I see them play this weekend.
Well, look, we know how talented they are. We know that, and there's an opportunity for them to throw the ball all over the yard this weekend in Lincoln. Can't wait to see if to your point, can they do that? To me, it's the focus thing on the road, and the skill is you walk in, you're dialed, but then when it hits the fan a little bit, can you refocus? Can you re-lock in? And I think when you go back and you watch the Illinois game, Kamari Ramsey's out the morning of the game, right? He's the kingpin of this defense at the safety position. He does as much as Caleb Downs does for Ohio State. Kamari Ramsey does it for USC. So we'll see how this thing shakes out, because against Notre Dame on the road, it was a game that was back and forth, and all of a sudden, kickoff return, and it's a rout. So I'm so curious to see how they just can navigate all the things that we know Lincoln in this stadium to be. When I look at their schedule, though, this Northwestern team, look out. I mean, if SC doesn't jump on whether it's Nebraska, Northwestern, or Iowa, it's going to be dogfight central, especially Northwestern and Iowa. So I'm kind of waiting even a little longer to reserve all of my judgment based on what Lincoln can be, how Nebraska plays at home. I think at the scheme of Northwestern and the line of scrimmage of Iowa, I mean, Iowa knows who they are. You could argue more than anybody in the country. So I think every week is this big-time test. And you're right, Dave. They could run the table. They could lose them all. I don't really know. I think that's the margin for error here. Jaden Mayava needs to play at his best. And I expect USC to take this next step over the next couple weeks.
I am a little concerned about teams that are going to try to run it right at them. I mean, we saw Notre Dame run it right at them very successfully, over 300 yards. And so you do wonder just about some of those teams you're talking about, that really physical football teams. And to your point there, Yogi, Iowa, Nebraska would certainly fit in that category. So, Northwestern, I should say. As for the team they'll play this weekend, Nebraska, they have that huge one against the Trojans. If you get through that, they head to UCLA and Penn State, and then a huge game at home against Iowa on Black Friday. It's not totally out of the question, again, that both those teams could run the table and be playing for a CFP spot. And I don't want to dwell too much on this. I feel like I've said it a couple times. The complexion of that schedule has changed versus the preseason expectations when you look at Penn State's struggles. And yet I still look at Penn State guys and I say, this is a team that brought back the most returning all-conference players in the Big Ten. I know they've lost their quarterback, but these are still a lot of pros on that roster and a lot of guys who on any given day could rise up and win one of those games and ruin somebody's season here, Yogi.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a couple things for Nebraska. One, like, how fun was it to watch their game back, Jake, where Dylan Raiola's in a three-point stance on, like, the tush push. Like, so they're having a good time, clearly, with Matt Rule and trying to keep it loose. I think the other thing is what Matt Rule said earlier this week of, we are playing a meaningful home game in November. But that hasn't happened in a little while for this program. I think it's a huge opportunity for Nebraska to do what I feel like everyone in college football, wherever you reside, you just want Nebraska to be back in that regard. There's a moment for them this season. And then I just look to their resolve. I mean, it's a tight game. It's a tie game. They go on a 13-play drive where they convert 4 third-down conversions against Northwestern. Jake, we talked about it all year. Like, last year, they didn't do that. Year before that, they didn't do that. I mean, this has been a team that has lost a lot of those games. So I think it's going to bode well now as the chips continue to stack and the stakes continue to grow. And they just need to play loose, I think, at home. Can Dylan Raiola do that? Can he utilize discernment? Can he not try hard? There's a phrase in the air raid world where Dana Holgerson comes from, which is be boring. be boring. That's what he needs to do. Check the ball down. Don't throw it underhand. Just operate this offense within the offense and see if you can lean on this crowd as a pseudo 12th man and get a huge win at home.
For me, it's very clear that this program has taken a stride under Matt Rule, and you extend that out in time, and I'm really excited about the future of this program. But then you look at this season, you say, what an opportunity they have down the stretch of this schedule. And for me, I look at Nebraska and I say, the special teams have got better. Their ability to finish games and win these close games. They're much more comfortable in the fourth quarter. And yet they have not played a complete football game yet this season. I have not seen Nebraska play 60 minutes in all three phases at their full potential. That's what it's going to take to win some of these games against their tough opponents. And I think the most important thing this weekend, it's been the offensive line play and their protection of Dylan Raiola. They're beat up at tackle. They're beat up at the offensive line. There's no excuses at this point if you're going to make a playoff push. What are the adjustments that have to get made against a disruptive Trojan pass rush?
They were much better on the offensive line against Northwestern this week, despite the injuries. I do think it's interesting. We talked about winning close games, and right to Yogi's point, like that's something that they haven't done in recent years. They're doing it this year. It's been 9 years since they've beaten a ranked team. 9
The crowd's
years.
going to be fired up. That stadium's going to be rocking.
Right. I'm not suggesting that just because USC has that little number next to their name. Washington's game against Illinois this week, such a big one in terms of playoff hopes. The Huskies winning it with a dominant second half. The schedule not too bad over the next few weeks, and then it finishes off with a rivalry game that could put them over the top. Wisconsin-Purdue, the next two, neither has won a conference game. At UCLA, obviously that one can be challenging, and then they finish up at home with the Oregon Ducks. Yogi, this feels a little bit to me like Michigan. You've got some manageable games again, at least on paper, manageable games, and then you finish up with a huge rivalry game that could be the one that puts you over the top.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, right? You win out and you're in the show. And think about that for year two for Jed Fish and where he took this thing over. I don't know if you guys saw Monday Night Football last night, but it was great. Patrick Mahomes had this acronym where he said EGE, everybody's got to eat. And I just started smirking to myself thinking about this Washington offense because of the players that continue to eat when they're playing. Jake, you were there the week ago. Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston. If you were to take a quarterback, running back, and wideout in any school in the Big Ten, I think you'd pick Washington because of the dynamic ability of all of them. Damon makes it such a challenge for everybody defensively. Jonah, he can line up at fullback. He could play wide out. He's in the return game. He can do anything. And then Denzel took a huge step this past weekend. So I think they are in a beautiful position right now because they're just getting better, right? They're not trying to hold it together. They're getting better. You're seeing young players fresh and emerge. You're seeing this offensive line get stronger. So as you play that schedule out that we just showed, look out. Like, I don't think anybody wants to play UW with what we have seen most recently as this weekend because it's such a challenge. How do you defend that trio where the quarterback can do all those things with his legs, Jake? I mean, you watched it in person in real time, and it looked as though they were running downhill at times against this Illinois defense.
I'd even throw in, I mean, they got Roebuck and Vines Bright, two freshmen. Sure. These guys are like 17, 18 years old. And in the second, you can see the game actively slowing down in real time, and they're playing with more confidence. And I think the key for Washington is, okay, the two losses to Ohio State and Michigan, the final score does not tell the full story. Those were competitive games before some self-inflicted wounds. And you lose to Michigan, part of the reason why, the left side of their offensive line was decimated. Their tight end room was completely decimated. Jed Fish said they're trying to figure out what their playbook can even be in the second half because of the injuries. Well, now they're healthy, and let's just assume they handle business. That is a 9-2 football team with all the youth that gets to say they're 9-2 and will likely be ranked, which means they'll be playing with confidence at home in a rivalry game. They don't lose at home often. I know Ohio State broke the streak, but at home against Oregon, November is just going to be amazing. This is going to be a glorious end of the season. Chaotic for sure.
I agree. I think it lays out great. We talk a lot about the offense. I thought Ryan Walters' defense was phenomenal, particularly in the second half. The way they shut down what is a dynamic Illinois attack. We know how good Illinois can be, particularly through the air. I thought Washington did a phenomenal job, forced them to make mistakes, which is something they don't do a whole lot, and came away with a win. Let's finish with Iowa. There is a very different feel to this schedule, I would say, than to Washington's. It is really, really hard. It starts with that home game against Oregon November the 8th after a bye this week. Then they go to SC. We know how tough the Trojans are, particularly at home. Michigan State, and then they end at Nebraska, Remember, though, this is a team that gave Indiana its best game of the year, losing by 5. If you win out here, they would be very, very deserving of a spot here, Jake.
Yeah, and don't get me, they should absolutely be ranked, so don't get me started there.
Crazy.
They will have plenty of opportunity to prove themselves down the stretch of this schedule. I already talked about the home field advantage of playing at Kinnick. It is a tough place for anyone to go in and win, and the Hawkeye team feeds off of it. But I think what the big difference for Iowa this year, of course it's Phil Parker's defense, but suddenly they're back to taking the ball away. Special teams is a complete asset, as it always is under Kirk Ferentz. But now the offense has layers. They're not a dominant passing attack, but they have layers in the sense of what Tim Lester has done to scheme Gronowski's legs with their base run plays. That's where the layers come into play, and that it all starts and ends with that offensive line. That is one of the more dominant units in all of college football right now. It looks like just classic Hawkeye football. They're outside zone schemes. They step in unison, road grade you, and they'll be in every game just because of the way they play, Yog. It's great defense, it's special teams, and ball control offensively. They're a tough team to beat because of their style.
You know, I was watching their film yesterday with our oldest son, Zane, and I'm saying, do you remember the week 1 against Albany? And Mark Gronowski dirting the ball everywhere and just feeling like a little stressed, it seemed, at times. And you watch this last game, this past weekend, and watch the opening couple drives. It's shots down the field. He's playing on time. To me, he played and threw with as much confidence as I've seen his entire time playing for Iowa. I mean, it was so impressive in that regard. And then when you look at the schedule, to your point, Dave, it is a brutal run. But in a vacuum, can you be like, yeah, I see Iowa win that game. And in a vacuum, they win the next game. So they're going to have to stay healthy. They're going to have to be really disciplined around their identity and just be focused. It's got to be that 1-0 mindset that is cliche here in November. But they got to run, because I could see them winning every one of these games in and of themselves.
To do that, they'll have to do something they haven't done in a while. It's not quite as long as Nebraska, but it's been 4 years since they've beaten a ranked team. They have lost 11 in a row, so they would need to reverse that trend against that challenging slate. A big stat presented by Gatorade. We started the show with the Big Ten teams at the top of the polls. How about the players at the top of the national stats when it comes to finding the end zone? Indiana's Fernando Mendoza tops the nation in passing TDs. Washington's Jonah Coleman first in rushing scores and total TDs. No receiver has more receiving scores than Elijah Surratt. And how about a little defense? SC's Bishop Fitzgerald tied for the lead in picks nationally. Lots of star power in this conference, Yogi. To whom would you like to show some love?
Well, a lot of players, but let me go back to the Pacific Northwest and do a little history lesson. A couple years ago, this guy named Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, these 3 receivers. Then you heard about this young guy, Denzel Boston, and watching him have a career day on the lake a week ago in Seattle was incredible. And not just how he played, but this moment right here. He gets hurt. You kind of hear him. Stop babying me, right? You hear him. It's just growth. Just absolute growth. To me, it electrified the stadium. It elevated the team and the huddle. They'd take a timeout. But I just think he's taking the next step to be a dominant player in college football.
Toughness is definitely a part of the championship run. Denzel Boston exemplified it. My guy that I want to show love to is Michigan running back Justice Haynes. Missed the game against Washington the week prior, comes back for the rivalry game. It's his first tasted experience of what it means to beat Michigan State, and he leads his team to victory. Michigan team's at their best. They're led by dominant run game, and he is the dominant run game right now.
Yeah, he leads all power conference players in the nation in terms of rushing yards per game. We will see you tomorrow. Jerry DiNardo joins me for that one. Thanks for watching Big Ten Today.